Hello, I made bread for my chemistry project. I used all-purpose flour and active dry yeast. To make my first dough, I add 2 tablespoons of yeast, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of salt, 1 1/3 cup of water, and 3 cups of flour. You can see that the flour and water mixture has this very liquid consistency at the beginning, and it does not resemble a dough. I mix the mixture with a spoon until I think it's ready to knead with my hand. And it's my first time doing this, so I'm not that great at it, but you can see how the dough is now able to clump up and has a somewhat rough texture. It's not completely smooth yet. And as I continue to knead, the dough gradually becomes softer and smoother. You can see its new flexibility and stretchiness. I knead until the dough is very smooth and ready to rise. When it is ready to rise, I cover it with plastic wrap and let it sit out. You can see how the dough grows to more than double its original size in this time lapse. Pretty cool. Here's a before and after. I repeated the previous steps with another batch of dough, except I did not add yeast to it. And you can see how this dough develops the same stretchiness and structural integrity. This comes from the gluten that develops as the dough is kneaded. When I let this dough with no yeast sit out, it did not end up rising at all and remained the same size. I shaped the dough into loaves. You can see how the one that had yeast and rose is much taller than the other one. I went ahead and baked the 2 loaves, and this is the outcome. The one with yeast resulted in a much larger loaf than the one without yeast. The bread with yeast was much fluffier, while the one without yeast was dense and tougher. Yeast are eukaryotic microorganisms that can be found naturally occurring on the skins of fruits and berries such as grapes, apples, or peaches, from plants, and from soil. In baking, yeast is used as a leavening agent. It is added to dough in order to expand the dough by releasing carbon dioxide, similar to other leavening agents such as baking soda and baking powder. This is the reaction that takes place in our bread dough. Yeast performs ethanol fermentation. One glucose molecule is converted into 2 ethanol molecules and 2 carbon dioxide molecules. Gluten formation occurs when dough is hydrated and mixed. The glutenin and gliadin proteins, which are found in the flour, bind and form gluten when water is mixed with flour. Kneading the dough uncoils the gluten proteins, which strengthens the gluten networks and the dough. Gluten adds viscosity and stretchability to the dough and holds the bread together, providing structure and chewiness to the final baked bread. The starches in the flour are broken down into glucose by an enzyme, amylase, which may not only be found in yeast cells, but also in flour as an additive. Glucose is then broken down by the yeast into carbon dioxide and ethanol. Carbon dioxide creates air bubbles in the dough and causes the dough to rise, and this risen dough results in a fluffy bread after baking. Yeast fermentation takes place when we make dough for bread at home. However, it is also used in industrial ethanol production, alcoholic drinks, carbonated beverages like kombucha, as well as the production of biofuels.